I wasn't going to lose the opportunity while I was in Bismarck to speak face to face with some people in Bismarck, leaders, whether it be the new head of the North Dakota Game and Fish, which we're going to speak to in a little bit, or whether it be a longtime member of the Bismarck City Commission, and that's Nancy Guy. How have you been?
Terrific.
Thanks for coming by. This is kind of fun to be able to not talk to you just through a phone, to be able to talk to you in person.
You bet.
So talk to me about Bismarck. I drive through, and I don't know how you guys keep up with it, because I came in at night last night, and there were lights where I used to come to this town all the time, and there's lights where I've never seen them before. This city just continues to grow.
It is amazing. We have grown more than 20% since since our last census 10 years ago. So it's just, the building boom is crazy. It let up a little bit when the oil boom slowed down some, but it has picked up again. And, now the problem is supplies and labor. But housing is a hot commodity in Bismarck.
So in terms of just sheer population, I talk with Fargo a lot, where it's become this long, narrow city. Because West Fargo's doing what they do. They won the lawsuit. So Fargo's got to build infrastructure for a long, narrow city. You've got to build infrastructure in many cases based on a valley going down to a river. So you've got to move water uphill. You got to move it downhill. You got to build roads in ways that a lot of North Dakotans don't. I mean, how do you meet that challenge? Because where people are building isn't the easiest place to get them infrastructure.
And you are absolutely correct about that. Just last night at our city commission meeting, we had a conversation with our director of public works on the Watershed, Michelle Closey, and she outlined $193 million in our water system needs over the near and and long term, and it all has to do with expansion of our water system to meet the needs of our growing city. So it is kind of crazy. And then along with that, water has to go somewhere after you've used it, right? So we have this enormous watershed in Bismarck, and of course it all heads towards the river, but it takes different routes to get there.
Yeah.
So one watershed is really huge, and then we have a bunch of little ones. So you get elected to a position like this, and you learn about things you never ever thought that you would think about.
Yeah. I mean, Nancy, I remember when I first started serving in the legislature and coming to Bismarck all the time. If I'm wrong about this, correct me, because I know how proud you are of your city, but I think Bismarck had a lower population than Grand Forks. I think Grand Forks might have had a bigger population. They're not even close anymore.
It's possible. It's definitely, that's definitely possible. I guess I wasn't thinking about those things.
I guess the point I'm trying to make isn't about 1,000 people here or there.
Yeah.
It's that Bismarck hasn't just done this, it's done this. I mean, it isn't showing any signs of slowing down.
No, and I think part of that is it was growing before the boom started. The oil boom started out west. Because when we came back from Kansas City, I think it was 2003, Bismarck was starting to really heat up. We saw big box stores coming in and that type of thing. And they don't do that unless they anticipate growth and economic growth in particular. So that was happening. But then I remember sitting at my desk. We owned the UPS store here back then. I'm sitting at my desk in the back room, and the radio, Myron Dorgan is on the radio talking about the Bakken Formation, and that the U.S. Geological Survey had confirmed the size of it. And I turned to my staff and I said, well, hang on, guys, because we're going to be off to the races. I had lived in Williston during the boom of the 80s. So sure enough, Bismarck was right on the edge of all of that activity, but if there isn't space for an engineering company to have an office in Williston, they'll put it here. And they'll have a lot of staff based out of here. So we had lots of people working in those oil sectors that lived here, worked out there. They worked remotely, or they, commuted during the week for work. So we definitely, from a population standpoint, benefited from all that activity in the West.
So this is an issue in Fargo, where I normally broadcast from, but let me give you a scenario. You've got this couple that raised their kids in this home, and then the town continues to grow around them, and their home value goes. They never plan on selling the home.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to live in that home until they get to a point where they can't live in that home anymore. So they don't care whether or not their home value goes up. In fact, it hurts them more than it helps them. Mm-hmm. How much of that comes your way? Because a city where you're doing this, home values must be exploding. And so that couple I just described they're going to pay higher property taxes on a home they don't plan on selling anyway.
Yeah, we haven't heard a ton about that. In fact, up until the last couple of years, we had really low property taxes. In fact, they were too low. So, instead of forecasting far enough out into the future and anticipating costs like the conversation we had last night about the water system, the attitude was, we don't have enough money, so we're not doing it. Well, you can't do that for very long before you start getting into trouble. Your road network and your landfill, your water system, all of that can't keep up with the growth, and people really start to feel the inadequate systems around them. And so last year we had to raise our property taxes 9 mills, and the year before that we raised them 9 mills, and that was
how much pushback did you get?
Well, it kind of depends. For the average $240,000 house, that came to about, I think it was $170.
Okay.
And for the city portion of your taxes, it's only 25% of your total tax bill. But I am the last person to say that that's easy for every family to absorb. So people found it kind of shocking, but we just said, we have to do this in order to set the ship right again. And then in the future, we need to make little tiny incremental increases of a fraction of a mil so that we don't ever have to do this again.
Going back to the growth issue, Nancy, though, the coordination,
Mm-hmm.
I keep comparing to Fargo, but they've got growth issues as well. So this is what I know maybe a little bit better than here in Bismarck. But there's a real disconnect between the Fargo City Commission and the school board. And they go like this a lot. And so it forces me to ask you, how well do you communicate with the school district? Because those two plans, need to, it seems to me, to plan together or get along.
Well, I'll say that when we are in the planning phase for a new development, for example, we have the Silver Ranch development to our east, and then we have the Elk Ridge development to our northwest. Both of those developments were large enough that we needed elementary schools for them. But we knew that before we approved those developments. Okay. So we do that coordination with the school board in planning those things. And when we've needed a new high school, for example, and maybe it's because of the shape of Bismarck's footprint versus Fargo's, the school district didn't kind of put it way out in the middle of nowhere. I know that was controversial with the Davies High School. It was pretty close in. Of course, now it's just totally surrounded. Right. It happened that quickly.
My daughter's one of them. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not in Bismarck, but in Fargo. It grew up around Davies, too.
Yeah.
It's still doing it.
So we are, though, at a point where we're really trying to work with developers on sprawl. So we're going to try to overhaul some of our development ordinances so that it makes it easier for them to be more dense, our minimum lot sizes and that type of thing. Because we're also starting, not only do we have sprawl, and that's hard on the cost of services, we're also seeing first-time home buyers are priced out of a home.
Yeah.
And if they try and buy building or current construction, an older home and rehab it, they run into a problem where the house is not in good enough shape where they can get an FHA loan. So that's a real issue. And, buying a home is the first step for families to start accumulating wealth. It's really great for putting down roots in your kids' development and sense of stability and everything. So we want people to be able to do that.
Sure.
But right now, the average home price of new construction in Bismarck is in the $400,000 range.
Okay, so last question, I promise. The percentage of renters versus homeowners in Bismarck. Do you know that number?
I don't.
Okay, in Fargo, I know that in most cities, it's 60% ownership and
Yep.
40% rent. In Fargo, it's just the opposite.
Yep.
Which goes to the reason I thought to ask the question is the point you made of those first-time home buyers and what it takes to get them out of an apartment setting
Yep.
and into home ownership. And then, for lack of a better way of putting it, you got them. They're
Right.
starting families. They're here. They're
Yep.
North Dakotans. So thank you for what you do.
You're welcome.
There's no glamour in it. There's no money in it, but you're willing to do it. So, Nancy, thank you so much.